day, my fellow educators. Welcome to the Schools Division of Tarlac Province webinar entitled Action Research Writing, a Guide for Beginners. This webinar's topic is about the principles and practices of action research, and I am Dr. Blessedy M. Cervantes, your resource speaker. According to Nugent, good teachers and educational leaders conduct their own investigations to identify and solve problems and analyze information about their classroom and schools. In the process, they also further develop their own professional competence. And this is what we are doing as classroom teachers. We want our learners to acquire the necessary skills, and at the same time, we also learn from our practices from time to time. If you are also doing this, it means that doing action research is not difficult for you anymore. Now, in the times of the COVID-19 pandemic, where different questions are raised regarding the opening of classes and the manner as to how teaching and learning in the classroom will take place, I think this is the best time for us to be the answers to these questions through our action researches. As beginners in writing an action research, I believe that most of you have still this feeling of uncertainty as to what action research is, how to write an action research, how to start writing it, and what are the guidelines to follow, so on and so forth. And these questions can make you feel anxious and afraid, or may end up not deciding not to conduct an action research anymore. But don't worry, I hope that through this webinar session, you can deeply understand the concept of action research, why do we need to conduct it as educators, and how do we start doing it. Action research principles are actually the information we have to understand about action research, such as its differences to basic research, its types, and significant beliefs that can serve as our guide in doing action research. First, before starting with your action research, you have to first understand the differences between action research and basic research. This is a very crucial starting point because once you develop a misconception about these two terms, you may end up doing your action research a wrong way. So let me show you the key differences between these two terms. First, in basic research, extensive training is needed. This is also what you do if you are enrolled in graduate studies. You have to first take a thesis writing subject and engage for years in studying it. While in action research, extensive training is not required since it is simpler, shorter, and easier to write. Would you believe that my completed action research was just composed of 30 pages? Yes, that's right. While my basic research in MA was composed of 200 pages and my dissertation more or less 300 pages. Why? It is because basic research involves generalizable knowledge. It means that basic research is intended to develop and test educational theory and derive generalizations, while action research's primary purpose is to improve the capacity and subsequent practices of the researcher rather than to produce theoretical knowledge. Another difference between basic and action research is, in basic research, we have a separate part for the review of the related literature and study that you cannot find in action research. Instead, related literature and studies are only incorporated in the action research contents as your sources. So unlike the basic research, which is more intended for understanding situations and concepts, and interpreting and analyzing general ideas, action research aims to propose immediate solutions to specific problems in the classroom. So for educators like us, our division directs us to focus on developing and creating ways to provide a quality teaching and learning environment. Basically, action research is a systematic, reflective inquiry to improve educational practices or resolve problems in any operating units. Action research's primary purpose is to improve the capacity and subsequent practices of the researcher rather than to produce theoretical knowledge. Improving practice means that the quality of the outcome of the process and products together are enhanced. To us teachers, like what I've said earlier, it is our task to focus on the problems we encounter inside the classroom, like the academic performance of our learners, their behavioral, or it can be about classroom management and our teaching strategies as well. Action research is focused on immediate application, not on the development of a theory, not upon general application. It has placed its emphasis on a problem here and now in a local setting. Since we start by identifying the problems we usually encounter as teachers inside the classroom, we also have to provide concrete solution to solve it, then test its effectiveness in the actual setting. This is an example of an action research. This is actually the action research that I have submitted the division and won first in senior high school teachers category last December 2019 during the Division Education Research Congress, and it also represented our division in the Regional Research Congress. So like what I've said, you should have a clear picture of your number one problem as a classroom teacher. In my case, it's the extreme absenteeism of the grade 11 TVL learners. Then upon identifying your number one problem, what do you think is the best solution to solve it? In my case, it's the use of the strategic task-based affirmative reinforcements or STAR technique that I personally created. We call this intervention. And in developing an intervention, it is better to be original and unique. Like in my case, STAR technique is a strategy I developed. It is also your task, my dear teachers, to come up with unique and creative interventions to solve your problems as classroom teachers. So this is now the difference of action research to basic research. In action research, we try to improve a certain skill of our learner or find immediate solution to our classroom concern using a proposed intervention. Action research principles involves a process that include educators working together to improve their own practices. So basically in action research, we focus on how to improve our own teaching styles and strategies, our classroom management, and the like. It is persuasive and authoritative since it is done by teachers for teachers. Our action research provides us credibility since we are doing to grow personally and professionally. It is collaborative since it is composed of educators, talking and working with other educators in empowering relationships. In action research, you can work together with your colleagues with the same classroom concerns like yours. It is participative since educators are integral members, not disinterested outsiders of the research process. It means that we involve ourselves into improving our own crafts, and at the same time, we also ask for the participation of our clienteles. Since we are addressing specific problems, the actual participation of the people involved is needed. It is practical and relevant to classroom teachers since it allows us to direct access to research findings. It is also practical because we want to do an action research to come up with concrete solution that will be used to immediately solve the problem in the classroom. Action research has also developing critical reflection about one's teaching. Since in action research we are trying to improve our practices, there is also a need for us to reflect whether the strategy that we are trying to develop is really effective or not. It is also planned, systematic approach to understanding the learning process. It is important that we carefully plan how we are going to execute our study. If you have questions in your minds about our curriculum or the educational system as a whole, you may contact an actual research to find answers to your questions or to validate your existing ideas. It is also involves a critical analysis of educational places of work. For example, if your school is implementing morning and afternoon session of classes, then you may conduct an action research to determine if shifting classes are more beneficial than the whole day class, Or you may observe that there are classes with more than 60 students in one classroom. Then you may conduct an action research to see which is more conducive for learning, classroom with 30 students or a classroom with 60 or more students. Action research also involves the cyclical process of planning, acting, developing, and reflecting a justification of one's teaching practices. So if you plan in conducting an action research, don't just stop in merely planning. You have to act on it, and when you are done gathering and interpreting your data, you also have to reflect as to the impact of the study to you as teacher and to the whole school community. Other important principles of action research are also the following. First, it involves not just the usual thing teachers do. It is when we are thinking about teaching. It is more systematic and more collaborative. In doing action research, it needs our creativity, most especially as we try to develop our own strategy. Like my action research that I've shown to you, in which I created my own intervention. It is not simply problem solving. It involves the specification of a problem, the development of something new, and critical reflection on its effectiveness. Like what I have mentioned earlier, action research involves a cyclical process, and it must be done in an organized way. It is not done to or by other people. It is research done by particular educators on their own work with students and colleagues. It means that we are doing action research not just because we are mandated to do so, or we simply ask other researchers to write our research for us. Rather, we should do it by ourselves because we have the first-hand knowledge and experience in actual classroom situation we are into. It is not the simple implementation of predetermined answers to educational questions. It explores, discovers, and works to find creative solutions to educational problems. In action research, we simply do not ask what's the problem, but we also come up with our own solution and apply it. It is not conclusive. The results of action research are neither right or wrong, but rather tentative solutions that are based on observations and other data collection that are required monitoring and evaluation in order to identify strengths and limitations. It is not a fad. Good teaching has always involved systematic examination of the instructional process and its effects on student learning. Teachers are always looking for ways to improve instructional practice, and although teachers seldom have referred to this process of observation, revision, and reflection as research, that is exactly what it is. Now, action research can be done in different types, such as individual, collaborative, school-wide, district, and division. If you are more independent, you may start your own action research. You may also collaborate with your colleagues, most especially if you encounter the same problem in the classroom. Action research can also be done school-wide by district or division. Now that you have an idea of what an action research is, the question now is, why do we need to conduct an action research? And I want to tell you, we really need to conduct an action research. Not just because it is a mandate, especially for master teachers, as part of the RPMS and a plus factor for teachers 1 to 3, but because I want you to understand why is there really a need to do it. First, we need to conduct action research to improve education practice in order to improve learning outcomes. I am sure all of us want our learners to improve their study habits and academic performances. Then why not conduct an action research about it? You use this particular teaching strategy in the classroom, yet your learners do not master the skills. Then why not think of a new strategy and test its effectiveness to your classroom through action research? Second, we need to conduct action research to respond to the call of 21st century learning, where learners' talents and potentials must be developed and honed in a learner-centered school environment. So if you are thinking of a topic for action research, you may also focus on developing a strategy to enhance the 21st century learning skills of the learners, such as their critical thinking, creativity, collaboration, communication, information literacy, media literacy, technology literacy, and flexibility. Third, educators can improve their own craft when they're involved in action research. So C, doing action research is really the best because it will help us to be more efficient and productive teachers. Fourth, educators who are consistently and regularly involved in the conduct of action research can soon develop into transformational leaders who shall initiate efforts for school-wide transformation. It means that doing action research doesn't just improve our teaching practices, but it also brings out the leadership spirit among us. Through action research, we can make a big difference not just in the lives of our students, but in the community as a whole through our developed interventions in action research. Next, when educators organize themselves to build up a small community of research-oriented individuals at the school level, they collaborate to significantly contribute to school improvement as advocates of research-based or evidence-based programs and projects that benefit the school's stakeholders. So as we conduct action research, what we are doing is actually we are establishing a research school community because what I've mentioned, action research is collaborative and participatory. It cannot be accomplished without the involvement of our clientele, so they themselves can learn that doing action research is really beneficial. In that way, they can also conduct their own action research. It means that the more action research done, the greater number of improvements are also established in the school. Then, educators who are also involved in the conduct of action research are engaged in deep and critical reflection, which leads to a better understanding of oneself and other people for a better humanity. And this is also one of the best reasons why we are conducting an action research. Through action research, we can also realize who we are as teachers, that we can do something to solve the problems in the classroom. But through action research, we can help our learners, and by helping them, we serve as the future's instrument for progress. Now, as we begin planning and writing our action research, Mettler and Charles said that we usually consult sources for answers that are most convenient to us, with which we are most comfortable. However, these sources have the potential to be fraught with problems. So what do we usually do? We use sources based on tradition, authority, and the use of our common sense. Traditional ways involved how we behaved in the past. Interventions that have worked in the past may still work today, but there is no guarantee. In addition, there may now be newer interventions that will work better than our old standby, so it is our task as action researchers to find new ways of teaching a particular topic or solving a certain problem. We most often use the opinions of experts whom we assume will know what will work best. However, simply finding someone who has a strong opinion about a given intervention or instructional strategy does not necessarily support the use of that strategy. In fact, it is safe to assume that as soon as you find an expert who supports any given technique, you will quickly find another who is willing to denounce it as being inferior. Sometimes we also use our common sense or human reasoning as a basis for answering questions. While human reasoning has gotten our global culture far throughout history, it is most reliant on dependable information. If information that we collect in order to help us make common sense decisions is for substandard quality of accuracy, our common sense decisions will reflect those various deficiencies. But what is wrong with tradition, authority, and common sense as sources? They have a tendency to provide unreliable information. This is largely due to the fact that teachers based on tradition, authority, and common sense use information that is biased to some degree. And this bias occurs primarily because the information was collected in a systematic and subjective manner. In order for the answers to seek to be accurate and of high quality, we must obtain information that is both valid and reliable. What are we going to do now? Primarily, we use scientific method in action research. Conducting action research involves very systematic, step-by-step set of procedures. I already mentioned earlier that in doing action research, we have to be organized. We have already in mind a clear picture of what we are going to do. Conducting action research also includes thinking more objectively. We should not base our research on mere opinions or our own feelings, but we base it on facts. So as new action researchers, what do you need to keep in mind? First, action researchers believe that people are able to create their own identities and allow other people to create theirs. So by creating our own interventions, we are actually creating our own identity as classroom teachers. And once our colleagues see how effective we are as teachers because of the action research we conducted, then our co-teachers will also be inspired to establish their own identities from the significant results of the action research. We must also think that through action research, we can create the kind of societies we feel are good societies. Like for example, in the classroom, how do we picture the best classroom? Is your classroom the best? Are your students the best? Are you a good teacher? If your answer is still 50-50 or you are still in doubt, it means that there are a lot of rooms for improvement that are needed. And how can you create the best classroom? It's by conducting an action research. Action researchers accept the responsibility of ensuring that their own lives are in order before they make judgments about other people's. Remember that in action research, we are trying to improve our own crafts, so it's better that before we looked into somebody else's practices and attitude, it's much better if we try to assess first ourselves, right? Action researchers see knowledge as something they do, a living process. So conducting an action research should not just be a one-time shot. If we want to be the best version of ourselves, we must continue to conduct action researches. So as an action researcher, how do we need to act? We must regard learning and experience as processes which enable individuals to make choices about who they are and how they are together. So this is a good thing about action research. We decide our own approach because we have the control over our environment and our participants. It's your classroom, so you are the only one to know what you need and what your students' needs are. Here comes the different practices in action research. In this second part of the session, I'll be presenting these 8 key points. Practices definition, rational, action research in practice, common topics, transformation, immediate solution, collaboration, and ensured implementation. First, what do we mean by practices? Basically, it has something to do with how we put our action research idea into place. How are we going to conduct action research in order to get better at it? And how will the conduct of action research be our habit as classroom teachers? So the primary reason why teachers like us are encouraged to be involved in action research is because it's actually a mandate, most especially for DepEd teachers. Through DepEd Order Number 16, Series of 2017, entitled Research Management Guidelines, schools divisions nationwide are mandated to establish their own division research committees and school research committees. And we are very blessed that our division is very supportive in terms of research. That is why we have a webinar like this. DepEd understands that research must be a practice of schools nationwide because it's a tool for the progress and development of our educational system. In addition, we practice action research also based on DepEd Order Number 2, Series of 2015, entitled Guidelines on Establishment and Implementation of the Results-Based Performance Management System, or RPMS, in Reformment of Education. RPMS actually requires master teachers to conduct a research. It's part of their CRA number 1, objective number 2. For teachers 1 to 3, it can be an additional points for the plus factor. But like what I have emphasized earlier, we must conduct action research not just because it's a mandate or not just because we are instructed to do so by our school heads, but we do action research because we understand the beauty in it, that with or without the instructions of our bosses, we are still conducting action researches because we believe that doing so will provide a big impact in the lives of our community members. In recent years, action research has been employed to study a variety of classroom and school-wide. Based on an analysis of 73 published reports of action research studies conducted by classroom teachers, Kochendorfer identified 7 types of classroom action research studies and the kinds of questions they addressed. So here are top 7 research issues addressed through action research. Number 1, changes in classroom practice. So it has something to do with what we usually do in the classroom versus moving outside of the box and trying something new. For example, you seldom require your learners to write. So if you let them have a daily writing task and see which is better. Or like our situation right now, we are used to have a face-to-face interaction with our learners, but how about in the virtual world? Number 2, you may also look into the effects of program restructuring. You may come up with a new approach in addressing the needs of your learners. Number 3, we can conduct action research for new understandings of students. We can use action research to help our learners think differently, like this example. What happens when at-risk students perceive they can be successful? Number 4, we conduct action research also to gain understanding of self as a teacher. What skills do I need to refine to be more effective in teaching students to work together? There are times as teachers that we don't see ourselves. We initially blame our students for lack of interest in poor performances. So how about trying to ask ourselves first, what have we done? If we already did and yet it didn't exceed our expectations, then why not look for another way? This was actually my mentality before when I came up with my action research on the STAR technique that I've shown you on my earlier discussions. I thought there was no hope for my students. They were always absent. I called their parents and visited their homes, and yet it was still the same. Almost half of the class were absent daily. So what should I do to solve it? Then I remembered when I was also a high school student, my family and my academic status was just the same like my students. But how come I managed to attend my classes regularly? Maybe motivation has something to do about it. So what I did was I devised my own motivational strategy, and it worked. All of my action research participants improved their attendance. Then I realized we teachers have to really be innovative and passionate about what we do. Since we are in teaching, then why not do the best we can? Number 5, we can also look into the new professional relationships with colleagues and students, like how can regular and special education teachers effectively co-teach? Or we may also focus on new strategies for mentoring and coaching our colleagues. Number 6, we may also find an inspiration for action research as we teach a new process to the students that instead of using the traditional and commonly used strategies, why not devise our own? And number 7, we may conduct action research if we are seeking a quantifiable answer, like to what extent are portfolios an appropriate assessment tool for kindergarteners. So you may use these 7 themes for your own action research. In Depth Ed, we have these common topics that can serve as a springboard in conducting your own action research. Under the research agenda category, we have the teaching on learning, child protection, human resource development, and governance. For the cross-cutting theme, we have the DRRM, Gender and Development, Inclusive Education, and others. So for teachers, we are encouraged to focus more on teaching and learning area, where we develop our own teaching classroom management strategies, materials, and enhancing our learners' competencies. We practice AR because we aimed for positive transformation. Personally, action research became the most transformative experience of my teaching career. Like my action research on STAR technique, I was so emotional when my participants told me, "Mom, for the first time since grade 1, we get perfect attendance." And from then on, they were able to attend their classes regularly because they understood the benefits of coming to classes regularly. So through action research, we can transform lives. We also practice action research to find immediate solution. This can be done by identifying a problem area about which an individual or a group would be sufficiently concerned to what to take action, selecting a specific problem, formulating a hypothesis, and specifying a goal and a procedure for reaching it. Like in my case, the problem that I need to solve is the extreme absenteeism of my learners. So, what should I do to solve it? Then I devise a new strategy. So that's how action research works for teachers. Action research also practices collaboration. Action research becomes collaborative when it is done in partnership with colleagues or with students or with university faculty or with parents or a combination of partners. Participants may pursue individual studies bound together by common theme, concern, or problem, then come up together to share their work and develop a common set of recommendations for educational improvement. The process emphasizes growth through group dialogue, reflection, and action. Or participants may form research teams to study one particular issue over time. For example, you and your colleagues have the same classroom concerns, then you may conduct an action research together. So as beginning action researchers, what procedures are you going to follow? First, you have to plan. You have to analyze the gap or what we call the top concern or your number one problem as a classroom teacher. After identifying your problem, what solution can you formulate? That is what we call the intervention. So in developing an intervention, make sure it's unique. Then you come up with your research title. If you are a DepEd teacher here at the Division of Tarlac Province, we follow a certain format based on the guidelines given by the region. So you may send us a message for further guidance as to the formatting of your paper. So what's the process of submitting your proposal and completed paper? First, you will submit your proposal to the record sections in the division office. Then you conduct a follow-up or send Mom Queenie a message to get an update about the checking of your paper. Then you will be notified if you can get your proposal back. Then you have to edit your paper based on the suggestions of the evaluators. Then you have to return your proposal to the division office. If it is okay already, then your certificate of acceptance will be signed. Then you can start conducting your study. Once done, the same process. Submit your paper back for editing. Once done, submit it again and wait for your certificate of approval and certificate of completion to be signed. And that's it. You already have your action research. So always remember, nothing is impossible to those who believe. Thank you for listening.